So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming back and joining us. We really appreciate you returning on this beautiful day. And like I said, hopefully most of you are outside on your decks enjoying the webinar. Just a couple of things I'm sure Darcy would probably recommend also to make sure you have your sunscreen on. Safety first, right? So welcome in for returning back to our webinar series, the ABCs of Returning Safely to Work. This series is presented by Safety Trainers, and today is episode 4. It's Thursday. It's coming up on a 3-day weekend. So episode 4 is 2 OSHA documents you already have to help with COVID-19 requirements. I'm Haley Steele, the marketing coordinator with Mass MEP. I'll be your moderator for the webinar. We also have Christy Grignon, who's our marketing director, and Matt Healy, our information technology manager, behind the scenes with us as well this afternoon. And of course, our panelist, Darcy Cook, is back again this afternoon from Safety Trainer. So because she's back, I'm going to assume she's got a lot more stuff she needs to get over today. Thank you for joining us, as everybody that's been with us. I'm sure there's a lot of you. This is your 4th webinar with us, so thanks for coming back. You all kind of know the routine. Your mics are shut down for now, but throughout the webinar today, we will have ways for you to engage through the polls, the chat, and the Q&A. The Q&A and the chat button should be on the bottom of your screen where you have your Zoom open. If it's compressed a little bit, you might have to hit the more button and you'll be able to see the chat bubble pop up. We ask that you use the chat to talk within yourselves with your peers that are in the audience with us this afternoon. And if you have anything specific you'd like to reach out to one of us, please use that as well. But the Q&A, we really would like for you to put your questions in there. The goal for that is to fill up the questions so that at the end of this, when Darcy is finished with the content, we do have time to do a little bit of answering of the questions that you can get out. The past couple of days, we actually have gone over for that, but we will try to stay on track to get through the questions. So please, as they come to your mind, just pop them in there and we'll get through them. Obviously, we have the polls again, so they will pop up throughout. We'll put them on a time limit, and then Darcy will be able to use the results with the webinar content. Today, we actually have an hour and 15 minutes set aside for the webinar, because if you've joined us, like I said, in the last couple of episodes, 3 episodes actually, you'll know we do have a lot of content to cover. And that so giving us the extra 15 minutes will allow us time to really dig into the questions and get you the answers that you need. So we will start with the content of the webinar, and then we'll get into the Q&A, which we've set aside at the end. And then to be respectful of your time at the end of the hour and 15 minutes and of Darcy's time as well, if we haven't addressed the questions, we will respond to those questions through an email. So if you've registered and your email's in there, you will get a response back to the questions you ask. It is taking us a little bit of time. Darcy's days are pretty long these days, so as soon as she can answer the questions, she gets them back and we're sending them out to each individual person. Upon completion of the webinar, you will receive an evaluation. If you would please complete the evaluations. They're extremely important for us at Mass MEP. We use the data for trainings and insight for our continuous improvement on the training content that's delivered by our internal staff and also by our third parties, such as Darcy with Safety Trainers. So in completion of the evaluation does give Darcy some insight too, to use in our upcoming episodes. We are recording the webinar today for proprietary and internal training purposes. I'm going to say this one again. This seems to be the one that everybody misses for some reason. We are recording the training and we do have the decks. And at the moment, we are going to, upon completion of the 5 evaluations, and once we get approval through Safety Trainers and with Mass MEP, we will be able to provide a link for you to access the videos and the slide decks. So please give us a little bit of time on this. These webinars are highly attended. There have been over approximately about 150 to 200 people in each one of these webinars. So the Zoom video takes a little bit of time for production, and we also need to make sure that the deck has the content in it that Darcy wants to provide out to the public. So please, please, please be patient with us, but we will get this information to you in your hands. We do understand it's very important to you and that you're anxious to receive it, but we promise we'll get it out to you. If in the meantime, though, because it is such an important subject matter, we do recommend that you reach out to us at Mass MEP. We'll connect you with a trusted advisor, or you can connect with Darcy at Safety Trainers. We will put up the contact information sheet at the end of the webinar. So I'm going to turn this over to our panelist now, Darcy Cook with Safety Trainers. So let's begin.
All right, everyone, welcome back and thanks for being here. I did open up the window and I am feeling a little bit, so I hope you guys are in a really nice place like Haley suggested. So today's content, let's set an expectation. I'm all about, I want you to walk away with something from this training that calls for an action. We're talking about your exposure control plan and your emergency action plan. We asked you yesterday how many of you had it and how many of you didn't have it. So for those of you that do have it, what I'm about to tell you is the information you're going to need to go make edits to those existing policies. If you've not written one before, this is your, remember, blank slate. And as you're building these, starting with the focus being COVID-19, okay, you can add the other emergencies as we go, okay? The other thing about, the plan for today is that you might have a piece of paper right now that has COVID-19 information. You've been creating its own document separated from all of your other OSHA compliance stuff. And that's great for the interim, for the immediate right now future. But long term, you're going to want to take a pandemic and you're going to want to integrate that in to existing OSHA standards and how you're managing these circumstances. So today's presentation is more about the long-term plan of managing documentation and revisions year after year than just a separate piece of paper on your COVID control plan. Now, I have always said, we're working at night while you guys are, sleeping in bed, comfy, and I'm continuing to get questions answered that we didn't have, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But in the last 24 hours, we decided, because of all the feedback that we've been getting from you, that we really need to put together a customized training program where you get access to me and my staff and Mass MEP. And instead of us talking high level about policy, procedure, questions, hierarchy of controls, we've actually taken some initiative, thank you to the fabulous Robin over at Mass MEP, who's working right now to submit our training modules to the state for approval. What's in it for you? What does that mean? That's what that poll question was that Christy just put up. If we can get this funded in some way, shape, or form, partly complete through consortiums, if we can make this happen, we want to know how many of you are actually interested or potentially interested in moving forward. So we're here to try to answer questions, build content, and support you during this. So your feedback is super important. I have to be honest with you, I'm super excited at the possibility that you guys can, get this funding to support, what you need, and that we'll be able to jump right in and help you on the learning curve pretty quickly. The other things is that we've been talking about definitions. So the footnotes at the bottom of CDC and OSHA and the mandatory state, and getting clarity on their interpretation about what a word means. And so we've been talking about the ones here that I've been updating, but you need to go right down to the bottom. So some of the things that we were talking about yesterday is clarification. Oh, if I could spell partitions correctly. Clarification on partitions. I will fix that in the slide deck. And clarifications on the 20% in the office space. So up until this webinar, we have been calling everywhere. Mass MVP has been using all of their contacts and then some to get clarity on these definitions. Now, the good news is I got an email a few minutes ago before we launched this webinar saying we actually have clarity from the state. I don't know what it is. So that means you all have to come back tomorrow. Okay, so tomorrow I will be able to give you clarity of definition of that 25% office? Is that 25% of the office in a manufacturing, or is that only for office related professional services businesses related to partitions? What if it's infeasible? What if we cannot put them up? There's a risk, there's a hazard. What are our alternatives? What do we need to do? Is there a possibility that we don't have to do it? You know, can we remove the word must? I will have those answers for you to the best of our ability for you tomorrow. All right, so where are we getting our information from? Same places that you've been getting from. The difference is we might be a little quicker and faster to navigate through the information for you, and that's why you're here, so we can sort it. The bottom of this slide deck, what's different is I added the link to basically my favorite resource right now for manufacturing. It's a combination of information that was put together by CDC and OSHA together. Right now, it's my go-to spot. I'm loving it. That's the bottom right there. All right, look at how much work you guys have done this week. I want to like celebrate you going into this awesome weekend. So here's all the regulations that we've been talking about. You've checked off every single one on this page. The only one that we haven't done this page yet is sanitation, and we're going to be talking trash. We're going to talk trash tomorrow. And then on this slide is, you know, check the box. We've got a few more boxes here, but here's the good news. By the end of today, we're going to have 3 more of these boxes checked off. And tomorrow, we're going to be doing housekeeping and hazardous communication with trash. So you guys are on the home stretch, and thanks so much for being, you know, on board with us walking through this process. You've made it fun and engaging for us. We're excited to be able to share this and help you. This isn't new. You guys must know this by heart. You're probably going to sleep dreaming about the hierarchy of controls, the upside down triangle, and how this implement, you know, how you need to use this as a methodology in every aspect of your business, okay? So let's get right into it. Action plan, emergency action plan. This is a plan right down there at the bottom, the CFR, 29 CFR 1910-38A. That is the starting point. Google search it. You can read everything that I'm about to tell you about the emergency action plan. OSHA has a standard, and in it, they tell you what you have to have in your plan. And obviously, they tell you what you have to have in the plan, but you have to make choices and decisions around each of those paragraphs to determine how your business is going to function and operate. Geographically, the people that you have working for you, the number of people that you have working for you, the physical space inside the building, outside of the building, what you're next to, city, suburban area, all of those things change your emergency action plan. That's why 2 manufacturers will have the same titles in their plan, but the content that's being written within it is actually just all about you. So we have an exposure control plan. It's a policy that has 7 critical elements in it. In addition to that policy, you have appendices. These appendix are based on individual high-risk situations and circumstances that could happen in your company or business. You're not writing an emergency action plan, an entire plan for every possibility. We're writing a plan, and then we're attaching these, I call them 1-pages. It might be a little longer than that, but we're attaching these 1-page situational things, because I can guarantee you, when you write the section on where we're meeting up outside the building, the location where I'm supposed to meet you should not be and better not be the same place in different circumstances. Like if it's a workplace violence active shooter situation, don't put me outside the building, standing right there outside the door in the parking lot area. If it's a fire, it's an explosion. If it's going to be, how about if it's raining, it's windy, we have a blizzard going on outside, you're not going to leave me outside as an employee. There's got to be a secondary location. So in these individual 1-pages, you're going to write some specific details about what we're doing differently because of this circumstance. So what do you think one of these pages are all about? What have we been talking about for a week? Pandemic. So you're going to have a page probably on fire. You're going to have a page based on workplace violence. You're going to have a page based on severe weather. You're going to have a page based on what happens when your neighbors next door catch their building on fire, or they have a problem over there, or something in the community, an exotic animal loose, a robbery happening, and they're chasing the bad guy through your backwoods. That's another page. And then, of course, we've got to now add something that we've never had to talk about before, which is pandemic. So these are the bullet point list of the items that I just suggested to you. You'll see on this list, I've added a few other things like loss of utility, chemical spills, your building being compromised during, blizzard season when we have snow and ice building up. We had roofs collapsing last year like crazy, and the year before. So we have to figure out what applies to you. In California, we're probably writing a plan on wildfires. Do we need to write a plan on wildfires here in Massachusetts? Probably not. We've got to look at the high risk situations, and wildfires could probably be incorporated into something else. You don't have to have a separate piece of paper on every single one of these. So let's just focus in on pandemic, because you guys are writing documents and making decisions now, and I want to show you how this fits right into your emergency action plan. So if you've got an emergency action plan, you've got these 7 elements right there, the bullet points in front of you right now. I want you to go and modify these sections by adding additional bullet points and adding additional, sentences or paragraphs about what you're doing. So this slide shows you without COVID-19, without a pandemic. I'm about to show you the next slide or 2 slides, and I'm adding in what you should add into these sections. So if you've been screenshotting the screen, or if you've been snapping a picture of what I have on the screen, get ready, because when I get to the COVID-19 pandemic one, you're going to want to snap a picture of it. So here's your elements. First of all, you have to have a way to report the emergency, okay? Who are the people that we're calling, 911, what does all that look like? Your next paragraph that you're writing in your emergency action plan has to do with the alarm system. You cannot just pull the fire alarm every time you want employees to leave your building, because obviously if they hear a fire alarm, they should leave the building. But that doesn't tell me what's going on in terms of the emergency. We don't want you pulling a fire alarm if there's a chemical spill, or pulling a fire alarm if there's an active shooter, or pulling a fire alarm if it's related to a tornado or hurricane. A fire alarm is not the only alarm that can be used to tell your employees to get out of the building. We use a fire alarm when there's a fire. So what else are you doing? Walkie-talkies, overhead PA systems. How about your mouth? Let me just give you a clue. If I'm in your building and you see me yelling and screaming and I'm running out the door, that's a clue. I don't run at all. So if I'm moving at a high speed, you better just follow behind me, because there's a problem. Something's going on. My mouth, your mouth, is probably one of the best alarm systems that we could possibly put in place. Some people are using technology with apps. You might have your kid's school pinging you. You might be on a 911 for your town that tells you there's a severe thunderstorm or wind advisory. There are lots of ways that you can be communicating with the employees that are in the building and those that are out, maybe driving to the building, or salespeople, or next shift. You got to have a way to alarm and communicate. So you can also see that communications is a tab way down at the bottom. But I'm going to use communications in this model a little differently than the alarm system model. What I want you to know is, in an emergency action plan, your employees are going to take on other roles and other responsibilities. Someone's going to be on the first aid team. Someone's going to be taking attendance. Someone's going to be calling 911 and working with third parties. Someone's going to be calling the hierarchy tree of everyone in your organization, letting them know it's gone. Where someone's shutting down the building if it's safe to do so. That is the roles and responsibilities, and we have to create a communication plan, telephone numbers, hierarchy controls in place to make sure that the people that need to know what's going on and help arrive in a timely manner. In the evacuation, you guys have to plan evacuation routes. How do I get out of the building? Do the doors open? When the doors open, do I walk into a busy street and am I going to get hit by a car? And then once I get out of the building, where else am I walking to? What are the hazards associated with that? What have you identified? Who's meeting me there? What am I supposed to do when I get there? What am I reporting? Missing persons, medical history stuff. Employees need to learn that they can't go to their car and leave in an emergency. They can't go, smoke break, go walk down to the local convenience store. When you leave the building, you've got to show up and we've got to have attendance, okay? So that's all in the emergency evacuation process. Then the next section is all about your critical operations. So if this is a non-life-threatening situation, you all just went through this. If you shut down your business or scaled back and sent important people home, here's what happened. You realize that there are critical operations in your building, that something needs to be turned off, shut off, plugged in. There was something going on. Those are called critical operations. So in a non-life-threatening situation, what are those? That has to be built into your policy. Not only do we need to know what are they, who, titles, who's going to be responsible for taking care of it during an emergency. And if that person isn't here and unavailable, like what's the secondary and the backup process to that? Next section is all about accounting for your employees. Now, this is about your visitors and guests. Now, this is going to come into play with your pandemic. You're going to see how this all ties in. But visitor check-in books, sign in, sign out, the package delivery people, your truck drivers and shipping and receiving, the employees that are here, the employees who are salary that don't punch in and out. How about the Salesforce team that's working today that's not at the building right now but might be on their way in, or were in the building and they left? Wow, how in the world do we account for all of our people? Because the last thing we want to do is send police and fire into a building looking for someone who's not in there, okay? The first aid section, this is all about while we're waiting for the professionals to come, and this is one of the things that we learned around 9/11, is that the word disaster preparedness was added to the dictionary, Wikipedia now, and it told us and showed us that we have to have a plan in place in the event that professionals are delayed, that we can manage and help our own staff, our own company in this area. So this is where your first aid team and training is really going to come into play. What are their roles? What are those responsibilities? And what are their assignments once we've evacuated the building? And so you're going to need to have a plan associated with that. So these elements are in your emergency action plan. This is what you should already have. You've already created this. For those of you who have it, you're going to love the next coming slides. For those of you who are just seeing this for the first time or haven't put this together, take a deep breath. I want you to create these 7 sections in your emergency action plan. And right now, because you need to do it now, and you're talking about it, and it's part of the the mandatory process of having these processes in place under OSHA and some under the new state mandates. I want you just to build this out based on what we're talking about, which is the pandemic. Oh, hold on, I went backwards instead of forwards. So look at everything in red, okay? So if you compare the slide that you just had to what this slide is, I'm just going to talk to you about these bullet points related to the pandemic, what we're dealing with. So reporting emergencies, who do I call if I have been exposed or potentially been exposed, or I've actually tested positive? You've probably written this already. You probably cut and pasted it from the CDC website. Maybe you got help from an HR professional. So where does that now go? Is it just a piece of paper floating around? Like, how does that build into your safety and health management system? Well, guess what? You can just put that stuff right into paragraph number 1 under reporting in your emergency action plan. In the next bullet point, when we're talking about alarming and notifying everyone about what's going on. So this is about telling, so we're in emergency. This is emergency action, pandemic. We're in a pandemic emergency. Your company is in a pandemic emergency right now. We don't see that end. And while we're in it, we are needing to notify people of what the hazard is. The hazard, the risk, the emergency is those potential who have come in contact, or you potentially having been in contact with someone and now catching it. So make this alarming system part of how are we now communicating to those employees based on our contact tracing and our investigation, our incident investigation. How are we notifying all the employees who were in contact with that potentially infectious or positive tested person for 2 days leading up to the symptoms that started or when we were notified, and build that piece of paper, what your directives are, what you've made decisions as a company, into this alarming section of how we're communicating and letting our employees know. That's what that's about. The third section is evacuation policy and procedure, our escape routes, getting out. Okay, So right now in a pandemic, we don't need to be running out of the building. The emergency is continuing and we're in it. But here's what happens. In your building today, you might have someone who gets sick and starts showing signs and symptoms of possibly having COVID-19. So that is what triggers this action plan. And now I'm going to ask you, what's the next step? If my car's here and if I'm safe and capable, are you walking me out the door and telling me to get in my car and go home? Do I not have a car? Do I take the bus? Am I waiting for someone to pick me up? Then, so here in this area of evacuation, we now need to create an isolation room. We need to create a sick room. We talked a little bit about that tomorrow. So what are all the protocols and what are all the things that you're doing? Build that into your emergency action plan here in a different paragraph or a different appendix, right? Critical operations. Well, you guys tell me, what did you shut down and what did you find out about your company and business over the last 2.5 months in terms of what's critical and who's critical, what jobs are critical and what operations are critical, in the event that if we don't deal with it and take care of it, it turns into another problem, another hazard. Okay, in your next bullet point, accounting for employees. So accounting for our employees, again, is going to be part of our contact tracing. It's going to basically, I told you in that CDC guideline of starting how many days before. Here's something you need to consider. When you hire someone and you ask them to fill out an emergency form about, call my husband, here's his name, here's his number. Because we've sent people home, because of the contact tracing, because of needing to account for all of our employees under certain circumstances, maybe that form needs to be redesigned. Maybe you need to ask, personal email for me that's not a work email, because if I go home and I don't have access to that and you've kind of, locked me out of the system, there's no need for me to be working home or I can't work from home, then how do you connect with me? What are the top data and the telephone numbers for me personally, for, my significant other, for my emergency contact? So put that all into place underneath this accountability for employees. Same thing now with contact tracing. What we're seeing and hearing is you guys need to have people who are coming in and out of your building. You can't just have me sign in, sign out. Darcy in, Darcy out on this date. Why? She's doing safety training and she's seeing Christy, okay? You have to have more than that. A telephone number, an email address. Now, I'm sure Christy has my contact information, but basically the CDC and what they're asking and what they're recommending is, in the event that we have to do contact tracing, that Darcy potentially was in contact with someone, you've got to be notifying them and you've got to have their contact information. So build that into this accountability. How do we account for everybody going in and out of our building? In the first aid section, this is your standard operating procedures, okay? What are you going to train your first aid team in, and how do you want them to handle a situation if I start to become sick, or I'm at work and I find out I'm tested positive, or whatever the case may be, or the person in my house is tested positive, and now I'm at work and I get the phone call that my mother, my father, my aunt, and uncle, and I've been at work the whole time and they live with me. So what does that procedure look like? Have we trained our first aid team in hands-only CPR and told them not to blow in the mouths of anybody? What additional PPE do we need to add to the team because of the pandemic? And are we looking at N95 respirators? You can build all this into your COVID-19 appendix, your pandemic appendix, as it relates to, and of course, if you made a decision around thermometers, we can build that into the plan, and any other additional equipment that we're adding to the building or that we're requiring our employees to use or take with them in a pandemic emergency, okay? Or because we're in a pandemic, if you have any other kind of emergency. So think of it this way. What happens right now if you did have a fire and everyone has to leave the building? So you got to have that piece of paper that says, where's our meetup point? We're using 6 feet of social distancing. Maybe our meetup spot doesn't allow for that. Maybe we have to create multiple spots. Maybe right now you have only one location for 15 people. Maybe you have to find 2 locations on your property and you've got to split and separate the teams. We can't all go in the same place, because what we're trying to also do in the emergency, although you won't be held accountable for citations in emergency, don't get me wrong there, okay? But what we do want to do is we want to think about, how do we continue to keep people safe and healthy, whether they're in the building or outside of the building, under whatever the circumstances are. So we need to have guidance and direction. Because if all the chief cook and bottle washers are above me are not here today, I want to know that there's a piece of paper directing and guiding me, that other people made, these decisions already for me, and I just need to follow the plan. Because an emergency is an emergency. Not everyone's there that you're going to need to be there at the moment when an emergency happens. So if you're at the top of the food chain on that, given day, you want all of this thought to have been completed and done for you. So all you have to do is execute it. Communication. So you got to train your staff in the roles and responsibilities that you're asking them to take on within this plan. And then I added an extra bullet point in this, which is the emergency response team. Who is in and on our emergency response team? Who is our specialty group related to pandemic information? I don't know, 3 or 4 webinars I said, who is going to be your COVID-19 coordinator? Who is going to be your pandemic task force? Those individuals in any kind of emergency, they're going to also play a role, because we're still in a pandemic, but we have to deal with a chemical spill, a fire, a building collapse, some other kind of emergency on top of it. So you've got to create communication and hierarchy, all related to when we're outside the building. Try to go as electronic as you possibly can. If we're outside the building, we can't go back in. Can I access things through this phone? Apps, links, where are things being stored? You want to think about the technology aspect of how it can support and help you during any kind of emergency action. So here's your summary for your appendix for the pandemic. The additional things that I would encourage you on this piece of paper is to make sure that you guys have an occupational health provider or partner, and that you've listed all of your supply chains. So if we get out of this pandemic and we have a future pandemic, who are the first phone calls that we're making to our supply chain to make sure that we can get hand sanitizer and disinfectant and PPE, or even just materials? Whatever you do in manufacturing, whatever you build, what are the raw materials? What's the backup plan if those people can't produce those raw materials for you? That's kind of on the business continuity side as well. So this bullet point here, again, is a little summary for you. It helps to walk you through it. In the emergency action plan, you also need to add in emergency cleaning. So right now, if I call you and say, hey, I'm in the building and I test positive yesterday, and I call you up and you have to go clean the area that I was in, or if I'm in the building and a family member calls, and now I have to leave, you got to go clean the area up. That's the emergency disinfecting that needs to happen. And so you've got to build that into this page. What's that process? Who's doing it? How we're handling it? And what does that look like? If you have me in an isolation area, what if you can't go disinfect the area that I was just in because it's an open manufacturing floor and my physical space hasn't been disinfected yet? Well, you need to put cones up or caution tape or something to let everyone know, don't go into that space, stay away from it, don't touch it until we can appropriately clean it and then open that area back up. So what do you have written in your plan? What other supplies do you need? Cones, caution tape. Whose role is it to do that? Where's that disinfecting coming? So these are the additional considerations, and this is an easy place for you guys to be putting that information. Under the first aid standard, you're all required to have and follow the first aid standard. At least one person during all hours of operation in your buildings needs to be trained in first aid in the event that you can't get them to a clinic or an infirmary in under 4 minutes, or medical help cannot arrive in under 4 minutes. And by the way, the letter of interpretation basically says there's no way any of you can comply with that. Therefore, you must have someone trained in first aid. So do we have all the right supplies? Do we have portable first aid kits? Cintas loves putting them on a wall, and I can't take them off. Nobody collapses under a first aid kit. Portable kits, extra PPE in them right now, training our people on hands-only CPR. Consider looking at getting an AED is always a good thing. Here's the bullet point kind of components to the first aid element. So choose your team. I listed out all the trainings that you're going to need to do with them, teach them. They got to learn about the signs and symptoms. They need to learn potentially about temperature checks if you're using that. They need to understand how to use the PPE differently when they're in a first aid situation and the layers that they have to use and why. Face shields might become part of that discussion. How about drills? OSHA requires us to do evacuation drills. We're used to doing the fire drill, but we should be changing this up. We should be blocking doors and running actual scenarios that make sure that our team knows what to do and how to do it. And then again, I busted out some of the equipment. Just remember, supplies and equipment coming from NIOSH and ANSI. That's what you're looking for. Those are the stamps that you want. Don't buy things off of websites that say OSHA approved. As a reminder, OSHA doesn't approve any of this stuff, okay? So if you struggle or you need updates, if you need to know exactly what's supposed to be in a first aid kit, because most of you are spending a lot more money than you need to on stuff in your first aid kits because you're letting people use it as a personal medicine cabinet instead of just truly for first aid. That's another conversation for another day. But if you have a question, put it up in the question box. And of course, we'll guide you along the way with that. Here's the training module. Emergency action plan. When do you have to train? At new hire. If you change my job description and within the plan and you want me to take a role of responsibility in that plan, or if the plan changes. So for all of you who have done emergency action training in the first quarter of the year this year, guess what you have to do? Retrain. Why? Because you've got all this pandemic stuff that we just talked about that you need to make sure that your employees understand roles, responsibilities, meetups, social distancing, how first aid is going to walk, how the communication process works. You know, how you're going to have to walk through this process over again once you make the updates to it. Here's your exposure control plan. This is predominantly around blood-borne pathogens, okay? On the right-hand side of this slide, it says transmission of infection. None of us, because we're not in healthcare, have an infectious control plan. Only healthcare has an infectious control plan. Here's a clue. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but I pretty much can expect that the blood-borne pathogen standard will be expanded, or we will have a new standard supporting infectious control in all companies and all businesses moving forward. So the blood-borne pathogen standard is currently what governs you and I right now under blood and other potentially infectious material. It is not clear and it does not apply to respiratory droplets. However, OSHA does have a directive on TB, and currently if they need to investigate COVID-19 cases, they're using a bunch of different standards and directives in order to enforce that, okay? So look at this. How many smiley faces are on this slide? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many X's? 1. What does that mean, Darcy? A bloodborne pathogens standard, there are 7 areas of it that apply to a pandemic. There's only one area, needle sticks, needles. We aren't using needles in a pandemic, okay? Yet today, because we're not bringing vaccinations into our company. If we bring vaccinations on site into our company, then guess what? Every single one of these sections will apply as it relates to a pandemic. So here's your bullet points. Without pandemic, you're required to basically determine and have a process of incident investigation of an employee's exposure. You need to also have an implementation program for universal precautions, hand washing, engineering and administrative controls. We rocked that the other day and all the changes that we needed to make to keep people safe. Personal protective equipment. You guys are hearing about that every day, every minute of your life. Housekeeping. These are the elements of the exposure control plan. Hepatitis B vaccination. Right now, you as a company are required to offer, but I don't have to accept hepatitis B vaccinations to those employees who qualify, those employees who you put in a position where they might be exposed to blood or other potentially infectious material. Again, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but let's plan for the future. What happens when and if we are starting to do testing or offering, not required, but maybe offering vaccinations. Right now, you guys maybe offer flu shots to your employees. So it's not a far stretch. Let's just plan. If rules or regulations come down requiring us to do it, guess what? It's going to fit right into our exposure control plan very easily. Our exposure control plan requires us to do a post-exposure and follow-up process. That sounds like pandemic to me. You all right now have a pre-screening process. You have a what to do if you're sick process. You have a how to get back to work based on CDC guidelines process, and the follow-up that continues and the communication during that whole process. Guess what? This is the home for that piece of paper. It fits right into your exposure control. And then we have communicating the hazards to the employees, record keeping, and then of course your procedures for reassessing and evaluating this document. Look at all the red, okay? The red is what I'm recommending that you do in terms of integration. The green is a future maybe, okay? I'm just putting it in there so that, again, we're not just thinking about today, but we're planning for the future. If this stuff about testing comes out, you already know, oh, we're all set. It's gonna fit right into our exposure control plan. We're gonna copy and paste what the CDC is telling us ultimately right into our plan, train our people on it, and we're gonna follow through with it. So determining the exposure, you guys have been working on this. Where are you going to put it? You're going to build it right into this first section of your exposure control plan. In the second section, all we have to do is expand the conversation that you already have written down, which is the hand sanitizing stations and hand washing rules. You've just created more rules. I have to wash on my way in. I got to wash before I break, smoke, lipstick, wash before I go home, wash if I touch surfaces shared, wash if I cough and sneeze. Guess what? You're going to put all those bullet points into the universal precautions section of pandemic. What are all the workplace practice controls that you're now putting in? Just create a pandemic section and bullet point out all of the changes that you've decided to do as a result of what we've been talking about. PPE, under pandemic, we got to step up our game. So just list all the PPE and what departments are going to be using it, what they're assigned to use, and then just indicate that we are, how did they get a new one? Are we allowing cloth face masks? Like, just build that information into the PPE section. And of course, housekeeping, which we're talking about tomorrow. So everything I talk to you about tomorrow with your disinfecting plan and hazardous communication and EPA products that they're going to be choosing, it's going to go right in to your exposure control plan. Why? Because you're already writing about using a bleach and water solution because of bloodborne pathogens. So why not just add the other parts under pandemic into that section? As you can see here that I've kind of talked to you about your exposure control here, the pre and post, as well as pandemic. The next section is the communications of the hazards. Well, the state of Massachusetts is mandating us to teach signs and symptoms. They're mandating us to teach about hand washing, cough etiquette, social distancing. These are all part of the trainings that we have to do now, so we can build it in. The new hazard is contact, right? The new hazard is droplet precautions. The new contact is the pandemic. And so we're going to write in here and get credit for all the trainings that you guys are now implementing into the program. And then of course you've got your documentation. Are you doing temperatures or not? The medical documents, please talk to your HR providers. Anything related to me medically, it should have its own file. It should be separated out from my personnel records or my training records or my licenses and professional licenses. Understand why and how come. I'm not the HR and I'm not the legal expert, but it's my understanding it's in your best interest, so get comfortable with that. And of course, what is the procedures for evaluating the circumstances around the situation? You have to do that if there's an exposure related to blood or other potentially infectious material. Well, we've been told contact tracing. If we have it, and we have more than one in our building, we've got to figure that out. That's your incident investigation. So you may have not realized how easy this information is going to slide into these two plans, but it's really sliding in very, very easily. I've got one more section, and then we're going to end. Signs, you guys keep asking about signage. You have to have the hand washing and the PPE signs inside, outside, in your building, department. As I transition into different sections of your building, you've got to have the signage in place. Social distancing signs, reminders all over. You can put stuff on the floor. You can use tape. You can use markers. You can put reminders up on walls, eye level throughout your whole building. So you've got to have these social distancing signs up. The educational piece, how to hand wash, how to check my gloves to make sure there are no holes in them, how to take my gloves off correctly so when I take them off, I don't disinfect myself, how to take my mask off correctly so I don't infect myself or potentially infect myself is the way I'm taking it off. All part of the plan. So where do I get these? Because these are free. Don't pay people for them. These are free. I'm going to give you in the next slide your link to the CDC's posters. Okay, so you can go there, print them, and start posting them, around your building. And then again, nobody's telling you, they're telling you that they have to be able to be read from far away. So this slide says it has to be read from far away. I bullet point out all the different posters that you have to have. You got to have one on stay home, cough and sneeze, signs and symptoms, using your face covering, PPE, social distancing. I copied and pasted this right off of CDC, and it's not mine, okay? The posters, where you have to put them, how big they have to be. You got to be able to read them from a distance. It doesn't tell me what the font is, but you got to read it from a distance. I encourage you to laminate them so that they don't get ripped, torn, destroyed while you have them up. And then here's the link you guys are looking for. I know that Haley and Christy said that they would put it up in the chat box for you. It's got every language under the sun. The CDC's done a really good job of creating that for you, so take advantage of it without a doubt. All right, there is your snapshot of how I think that your paperwork that you are creating and the decisions that you're making for a long-term plan, because we don't want the pandemic, control plan to be this thing all by itself. How does it integrate into your safety and health management system for, moving forward? And how do we review it on a regular basis and make it part of what we're already doing? I think that those two places, your exposure control plan and your emergency action plan, are two places that you can start to incorporate everything that you've been doing. All right, Haley and Christy, back to you guys.
Uh-oh, did we lose Haley? Is she gonna put me on the floor? Oh,
I'm
there
sorry.
she is.
I was trying to answer a question. I was going to put in the Kelly asked, what are the required and recommended signs to put up, which Darcy just went over. So Kelly, hopefully you picked up on that. And we also did put the link in the chat. So you should be able to copy and paste the CDC poster link. It's in the chat. And if everybody goes in there, if everybody can just give me a hands up to let me know that they are able to, yes. So yes, everybody, good. So everybody can copy and paste them. Excellent. Good. All right, super. So that answers that question. Ooh, Darcy, this is great. We're gonna fly through these questions today.
Nice.
Okay, so I'm gonna answer live. Done. Yeah, everybody's 14 people raised their hands and said they got them. So Stephanie Fisher said, I just missed the CFR in the last slide. Can you flash back, please?
CFR. Oh, the regulations CFR. Got it.
Yes, please.
Right there. Signs. 1910.145. So just remember, that's OSHA's directive on signs. Emergency, evacuation, directional, informational, educational. We also have to look at what Massachusetts mandatory requirements are about posters and signs on top of what OSHA's fundamentals are too. So this is with that blending where I said, hey, I read a bunch and I try to put it all together in one place for you. There's not everything's in one place yet for you guys.
Okay, so I have another question here. What agency is the no breath CPR directives coming from?
American Heart Association, Red Cross, National Safety Council, all of the traditional, kinds of CPR programs that you guys use. ECC, the Emergency Cardiac Care, they basically do all the research and they make the decisions, which American Heart ultimately owns or manages. So if you want to think about it, ECC is the research. AHA owns that research. AHA is the one that kind of sets the precedents and the standards. It's actually how it's written into our laws here in the state of Massachusetts. It's got to be equal to or equivalent of an AHA program. And AHA is putting out the directives of hands only, no breaths. As a matter of fact, if you guys need CPR and first aid training and you have us come out and do it, the directive is that we don't even practice doing breaths anymore under the pandemic. You have to be able to demonstrate, but you have to be able to verbally communicate that you do it, but you don't have to actually demonstrate in order to pass the class. So we've got a bunch of different ways to do that in classroom environments and so on and so forth, but that's where it's coming from.
Okay, so I'm gonna hit this one again. I'm gonna let everybody know I'm getting a lot of questions on receiving copies of the presentation and the videos. Everybody that is on today, when you close out from the webinar and you leave this afternoon, you will receive a link that will ask you to complete the evaluation on the webinar that Darcy presented today. If you could please fill out that link. At the end of the series, which tomorrow is episode 5, it's going to be our last episode, which is about disinfecting and cleaning safely. We will end the webinar series, and then after that, once we can get all the videos produced and edited the way that Darcy needs them to be in order to be released, and the same with the content, we will be releasing links to everybody. So again, everybody that's still on, that's one I have to kind of hit home a couple of times, but I think we just tried to answer that live. So for those of you that are on, you will, when you end the webinar, you will receive an email to say, hey, can you please complete the evaluation? Now, back to the important stuff, which is answering your questions for Darcy. Can we assign employee to do EAP training online?
Okay, so the answer is OSHA does not like generic training. So if you've had a training designed and customized with telling me exactly where the meetup point is, who my contacts are, how, you know, what the hierarchy is, what happens in the first aid situations, where I put, if that EAP is customized and not generic, not like what I just did to you, but you have to actually tell your employees what to do, how to do it, where to go, specific to your planned business, then yes, you could. If it's generic and it just says, hey, we got to have a way to take attendance, hey, we got a way to tell you, they need, your EAP training has to say, how are you alarming your staff under all of these emergencies? Where is attendance being taken? How, you know, what are the rules of do's and don'ts? So EAP must be customized.
Okay, all right, so that's a good one. Somebody's asking again, Darcy, the 2 slides for CRFs, somebody missed the second one. Would you mind putting that one back up for them to see?
For the second slide or the second
Yes.
standard?
It says earlier you had 2 slides of CRFs. I missed the second one.
Okay, so first slide, whoops, sorry, is the, oh my gosh, sorry you guys. Here it goes. So the first one is emergency action. So you guys are general industry. So every CFR starts 29 CFR 1910. The only thing that ever changes is what comes after the dot. So emergency action plan is dot 38 and then the A, and then there's a whole list after that. We're just getting you going in the right direction. Then when you get to the first aid standard, it's point 151 starting at the B. So A is just a summary, start at B. And then for your exposure control plan, again, same thing, 29 CFR 1910, it's all general industry, point 1030. And then your last one is going to be signs, which is point 145. And that's I think that's all I put in today. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Here's a good question. How many people in the building must be trained in CPR and first aid? Is it a per amount of people in the building?
No, here it is. I love safety because it's so vague. They tell you you have to cross the finish line, but they don't tell you exactly how to do it. Because remember, we're not all the same in manufacturing. And it isn't based on number of employees. Here's what it says, right? You have to have a minimum of 1 person trained in all buildings during all hours of operation, taking into consideration vacations, sick days, right? First shift, second shift, third shift. You get to decide how many people that is, okay? Because if anything were to go wrong and they were to challenge that, they're basically going to say, how did you come up with that decision, right? What was your hierarchy of controls that led you to say, we need 10 people trained, we need 5 people trained, you know, so on and so forth. So you get to decide.
Okay, well, it looks as though everybody must completely understand what you're talking about today, Darcy, and they're getting the hang of it, because that's all we have for questions right now. I don't have any other further questions, and we are right on time. Let me see what everybody.
So just remember, tomorrow I'm going to have a answer to you. I don't know what that looks like yet on the 25% with office and as well as partitions, okay? So come back for that tomorrow. And tomorrow, hopefully, we'll have some more insights on the opportunity, the potential opportunity for grants and fundings. We are continuing, Christy, Haley, Matt, and the team at Mass MEP. We might be able to launch or give you an indication of some other things that we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks for you, with the intent to serve you. So keep an eye out on what's going on.
Okay, so well, some last minute questions coming in. So Christina, the contact tracing, when does this need to start? Like, is there a date?
There isn't a date, because you only have to do contact tracing if you end up with a positive case in your building, right? It's got to be work related. So until that happens, then you don't have to start it, but you've got to have a process in place ready to go in the event that you have to do it. I hope none of you have to do contact tracing and at all. But contact tracing to me is just another word for incident investigation. So if someone got sick or injured in your building, you would go find out what happened, gather all the information, and you'd write up a report about that.
Right.
I want you to think of contact tracing almost in the same context, because it makes it easier for you guys to incorporate into your already safety and health management system, because that is near misses, incident investigation. It's already part of the same language and the same processes that you're used to doing under OSHA compliance.
Okay, so Christine then said she had a positive test on April 3rd.
Yes. So then the question is, go do an incident investigation, find out, does it sound like it started in your building, or does it sound like it happened outside? And then while that person was there, who did they come in contact with, right? Up to 2 days before the symptoms started or you were notified. And then you've got to follow your HR CDC process about letting employees know that they potentially came in contact with someone, especially if it's less than 6 feet on prolonged period of time, greater than 10 minutes. And you got to match all those dots. And then you're going to what? Use a letter. If you don't have an HR partner and you're struggling, I strongly recommend that you talk to AIM. It's another partner of Mass MEP and safety trainers. And I've been reading and keeping up on all their stuff, and they're doing a really good job. I'm not a great HR person, but I would encourage you to keep looking for direction from them. There's no when does it have to start. It just has to be part of your documentation.
Okay, so I have 2 more. These are the last 2 questions we're going to take. And so Steve says, there was a comment made about a first aid team. If you are more than 4 minutes away from a care facility, guidelines are loose on this one. And then he lists the guideline specifics, the number. Says in the absence of an infirmary, clinic, or hospital and in near proximity to the workplace, yes, if a hospital is less than 2 miles away.
Yes. The letter of interpretation. So who's the gentleman that asked that?
Steve.
So yeah. Next to that regulation is a little like envelope. That means that there's a letter of interpretation. When you go click on that envelope, it will tell you what near proximity means, and it will tell you a timeline. In other words, you have to have someone in your building providing care and assistance to those employees in under 4 minutes. It can't be done.
Okay, so I guess the slide that the individual was looking for was for, the gentleman said, not those CFRs. These, there were the 2 slides of CFR. The second was OSHA standards COVID. The one before was about slide 7, he's thinking. So we'll share this back over with you. I'll stop my sharing, Darcy, and you can pick it up.
Slide 7. So he might be looking at these.
All right, you have to share your screen.
Oh, sorry. I can see it. You can't. Sorry, you guys. Oh, you can't see. Okay, so you might be talking about 3, 6. Yes. So you're talking about these. The actual list of all the CFRs that we've gone through this week. So hold on. Let me get from current slide. Oh, Can you guys see that? Can
Yeah.
you see it?
Yeah.
So these must be the CFRs that they're looking for. So these are all the CFRs related to OSHA standard on all the topics. Read them and deep dive into them.
So I would say, Dan, if you're still on and if this is what you want, you can raise your hand and let us know that.
It's slide 7 and slide 8.
Yep, he got his hand up. He says
Perfect.
that's good.
So snap. So here you go. Snap a picture of 7. It's like going to the eye doctors. Camera 1, camera 2, camera 1, camera 2. Sorry, I'm probably giving these people seizures.
Oh, no, not at all. Well, I think that wraps it up. So thank you, Darcy, again, for providing such great content. Obviously, they're well received and it's important information that everybody wants. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We do have one more episode that's tomorrow, same time, same bat channel. It is our episode 5 of the week, and it is all about safety of disinfecting properly. No, I never would have known that there's a proper way to disinfect safely. So it's going to be a great topic for everyone to join us. So if you haven't registered, we did put that registration link in the chat as well. And you can always visit us at massmep.org and go under our workshops page. And in the calendar, you can click on tomorrow's date and you will see the ABCs of returning safely to work, and it'll be in there. So Stephanie says, amazing content. Thank you, Darcy. And then she said, thank you to Christy and I. So thank you all for being here today, and we will see everybody tomorrow at 1. Enjoy,
all right, enjoy the day, everyone. Go get some sun.
Yes, please get outside. Thank you.
Bye.